Welcome to the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may have missed, with your hosts AJ Kuti and Jason Gordon.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm AJ, Jason sitting across me. We are the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may not have prepared you for, and they probably didn't. Jason, how you doing?
Killing it, AJ.
Killing it. I love. You're having these great weeks.
Yeah,
I'm over
one
here
after another. They've been
flipping, losing it.
You know, well, it's springtime here now when we're recording this episode. So, you know, aside from the pollen count, the weather's turning nice. I've been spending a lot of time outside. It's been awesome.
Yeah, it's just been busy here.
About to say, you've still been buried, right?
Yeah, no kidding. It's been one thing after another, and I've been putting off a bunch of stuff in my other classes just to finish this one paper, which the first draft is okay. It's done. So now I'm just waiting for the feedback and then going into the final draft, which I'm pretty sure there's probably going to be more red marks on my paper of the first draft than there will be, written stuff. So he's probably going to need a new red pen after he grades mine. But today's episode, we are going to get into something that is very interesting. I saw that you kind of proposed this on the show doc, and it never came across my mind really because I don't think it's, at least for me, it wasn't something that I paid attention to at the time. But hindsight's 20/20, and I can look back and see things did happen, and that is reinventing yourself in college. So the time that you're, within college, it's changing. When we say reinventing, but it is also changing kind of different aspects of yourself. So how does that sound to you?
Really good. I mean, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. We use the word reinventing, but really just changing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was natural evolution, intended change, whatever. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. But before we do, just remind everybody, our website, Reschool'd, that's Reschool with a D, not an ED. Check us out. Look at our old episodes, that type of thing. Shoot us a message. Check us out on the social media profiles, right? And your podcasting platforms, right? Like us, follow us, whatever that platform allows you to do. So you get notifications when we drop new episodes and you can stay up to date with what we're putting out there. So,
well, quick question for today's episode, and that is, are you the same person that you were coming into your freshman year?
No. I mean, in so many ways, no.
That's an emphatic no for me, but yes, Continue.
Well, I think this might be a good opportunity for us to tell, some personal story or evolution there. But me, I'm from a small town, very southern.
No kidding.
Right? And it's a cotton farming town in the middle of nowhere. It's kind of a poor town type scenario. I'm first generation going to college, didn't know largely what to expect from the experience and things just because I didn't have a lot of experience. Everybody that I was around was kind of a singular mindset from the town type thing, sometimes in good ways, sometimes in really bad ways. When I got to college, I went to a liberal arts college, and it was very diverse internationally, just a mix of student body, things like that. And I just became absolutely infatuated with foreign culture that was in any way different than mine. And some of that was culture you saw with people in different parts of the United States at different socioeconomic echelons and different ethnic groups, right? Type thing. But that being said, I was engulfed in it, right? My best friends were, I have one best friend that I grew up with that went to college with me, and then had my other best friends were from other countries, right? Type scenario. And just that experience, that exposure collectively with the courses I took that were culturally focused, the language, the study abroads I took, all of those things together it changed my mindset, my outlook on things so much. So I guess in personality type, right? There's a lot of things that are similar as to who I was when I came into college, like what motivates me and things like that. Some of those things stayed the same. I think those are things that get ingrained early on. Like Einstein said, right? That common sense is a collection of prejudices you establish by the age of 18. A lot of things, you're exposed to, right? That's the way you see things and a way to keep going. And I'd say a lot of that's still present for me in terms of my outlook on life in many ways. But when it comes to just how I live my life, what I appreciate, the things I enjoy, the things I take part in, I'm a completely different person. And I mean, college was the driver of that without question. All right. So then enough about me. What about you?
Well, I don't think there's a question that I'm definitely not the person that I came into college with. And I also would argue that I'm not the same person that I left college as either currently. I think, with every major event that happens in your life, you're going to have changes that are occurring in that environment, which are going to ultimately, lead to you changing in some capacity. Now, my foundation is pretty much the same, in which I like to have fun. I put a lot of effort into having fun, at the expense of other things. But like you said, like the motivation, that I think changed to a certain degree. My future outlook changed. A lot of things when you go into college happen during those, what is it supposed to be 4 years, but sometimes it's 5 or 6, or depending on where you're at, 8. There's a lot of things that happen in that time that give you different experiences past. I mean, if you're really looking at it from the average college student, this is the first time where you have that almost complete autonomy of your time, your effort, and your focus. You may be living with your parents still, or you may be living in a dorm, but you're not kind of that. You're quote unquote the adult. You're 18. You're getting out there. You're doing your own things. You're making your own decisions, good, bad, or indifferent. What the outcomes of those decisions are. So with that, you start to experience things from a different perspective, and I think that, for the most part, changes a lot of people, especially if you're open mind to those change. Now, if you're actively trying not to change because that's just you have your way of doing it, that's one thing. But to me, I absolutely, and like I said, even to this point, and I've changed since that when I graduated college, because more and more factors have entered my life. When you're going through your undergrad, that's for the average person, that's usually when they start dating with the intent to marry. Mm-hmm. That is another factor right there that's going to change somebody, because you're looking at something differently. So I there's no question I changed from my freshman year.
Well, if you believe that saying that we are a collection of our experiences, right? That it's natural that the more diverse experiences you have, the more you're going to start adding things to who you are.
Yeah.
And post-college, right? I've had more experiences. I would say I had some really fundamental changes in college, because those were those were the first times I was exposed to so many different things. But later on, right, there was all sorts of new things that came into my life that changed my personality a bit, changed my way of thinking a bit, changed my outlooks or my expectations or goals for life a bit. And collectively, that changes who you are, right? So yes, I'm with you there. So,
man, I could tell you when I was in college, it was nothing for me to stay up till like 3 a.m. doing something, either studying for something, or more times than none going out with people or whatever. At 3 o'clock was nothing. Now, if I'm not in bed and sleep by 11, I'm having a miserable morning.
Oh yeah, well, trips around the sun will do that to you, man.
Oh,
it's
buddy,
just the number of years.
All right, well, let's get to our main question. And the first one I think is very just kind of basic, but I think it's very important, kind of setting us up with the next ones, which is, why do you change in college? And I think we kind of hit on it a little bit.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody's going to have a different experience, okay? Your classroom stuff, let's start with that.
Sure.
Are the things you learn going to open your eyes to how things work? Going to expand your thought to new horizons? Yes. That's the whole purpose of education, right? Make you think more deeply.
And so, and let me interrupt you there, because I think one point of this is, we're not saying reinvent yourself from a personality standpoint. One of the biggest changes that most students have in college, exactly what you're talking about with the experience in class, is they change their major.
Mm-hmm.
They go into class, or they go into college with the expectations of majoring in this one topic. Then they go through some experiences of those classes or other classes to find out that they may be better suited for. And they realize, you know what, this is probably not the path that I want. And they change majors. So that's probably one of the big ones that happen very quickly.
If I were to rank the majority of my students on their understanding of career paths and career fields and the things that they can do in life, most of them would get a failing grade. They have no idea about the various paths you can take in life, what it takes to get there, right? That type of thing. So, college introduces you to that. That's naturally going to change things. And when you change the core aspect of what you're motivated towards, what you're seeking to achieve, that leads to all sorts of fundamental changes in who you are.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's number one, the classes, right? The classes are going to change you. The information you're presented with.
The people who you hang out with are also going to change.
Yep.
You start to learn. That was actually one thing that I was not in high school. Obviously I wasn't the popular kid, but I didn't have a group of people that I hung out with. I was kind of like the floater that would go from group to group just to kind of hang out, just to have fun. But I guess you'd say, if you're looking at it in terms of high school terminology, I didn't really belong to a group. I was just kind of a group of myself, and it wasn't fun, especially in the first kind of few years of high school. The tail end of high school, I started wrestling, and that's what made it. Well, I say the tail end. It was my sophomore years when we started, but we really had a really close-knit group my junior year, and that's actually the reason why I stayed and didn't go to college early, is because I didn't want to lose that opportunity to finish my wrestling career in high school. Mm-hmm. But I was looking forward to college because most of the people that I'd hung out with, especially my junior, senior year, were in college. And so the people that you hang out with in high school, that you see every day in high school, they're going to go off to different places. So the people you're around change, which naturally has an impact on how you are.
Absolutely. I look back to high school. I had one really close friend in high school. And I had a small group of friends, and then that was about it. And then my closest friend graduated a year ahead of me and went on to college. And I was it felt like being a loner. I didn't relate well to people in my town. I didn't relate to. I was a little bit different in many ways, right? Not for good or bad. It was just I was different. So that aspect. So it was pretty easy for me to break away and get away. I was always looking for something different. But those people influenced me a great deal early on. But I was just very susceptible to the influences of others when I got to college because I was looking for something different, right? Type scenario. So who you're around, right, is going to affect you a ton. I'll throw one more onto that, right? So we've talked about, the classes, the knowledge is going to change you, type scenario, and then the people you're around is going to change you. Your interests, okay? Your interests are going to change, right? Your passions. You're going to learn about things that you were not aware of before. And then all of a sudden, that's going to be an underlying driving force in your life. All of a sudden, you get to school and you're like, oh my gosh, I love culture. Or, hey, I love video filmmaking. Or I love, music. Or I love whatever. And that starts to, the actual thing that you're passionate about is going to drive who you become, because your personality is going to start to orient around that as well. And so anyway, I would say, collectively, all the things that the college environment offers, exposure to knowledge, exposure to unique people, and then exposure to, again, things you haven't seen before, things that are some way motivators or interests or drivers for you, right? Things that start to scope the goals of your life. Collectively, that's why college changes you.
Yeah, my last one was going to be experience. The experiences that you gain, because that's one of the things, like with my wife. My wife, she struggles with finding out what she's passionate about. And I think a lot of it has to do with that she was not able to get as much experience out of college because she was just in a different situation. She had just gave birth to her son. So she was a full-time mom. She worked and she was a full-time student. So she didn't have a lot of that time to experience the things that college has to offer. So she never really was able to find that passion. So next question, kind of going on to this, like I guess really an extension of, is this change that we're talking about, is it more active or is it more passive?
I think it's a combination of both.
Okay.
Initially, I think it's active in terms of you are trying to experience new things.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not aware that it's going to change, but your active pursuit of new things is going to change you, and we know that. I would say after that, the influences that are around you and whatever, as they say, on the negative side, you don't change the devil changes you, right? Type scenario. It's basically just saying the people or the situation you're around is going to influence you. It's going to change who you are, no question about it. So the environment that you find yourself in is going to passively affect you. There's no question about it. But then once again, we just talked about things like you're going to have experiences, but you're going to identify interests. You're going to get a new, reason for being, right? What's the French word, raison d'être or whatever,
I didn't take French.
Yeah, well, it's just, it pops up, right?
There's a couple French words I know and they're not good, so.
So that's going to be a driving force. And then you're going to actively pursue that. And what that means, some people change their personality somewhat or their outlook to fit in with what they're passionate about, right? Type scenario. So I'd say it comes back, full swing again, that you're actively pursuing something the same way you were actively pursuing something when you came to college. And so that is going to result in changing you. But the context of anything you find yourself in, no matter where you are, is going to, so it's going to be a combination of both.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I was going to say it's both. I do think the types of change, whether it be passive or active, I do think they have a implication towards the future, at least in my opinion. This is just a rationale that's just kind of forming in my head. I don't know if there's any research behind this. I don't know if there's validity behind this, but I just kind of want to get your opinion. I would almost feel that like the change that occurs passively tends to be more long-term because you're actually changing, you're changing your foundation to a sense, and it's doing it kind of, your environment is doing it for you. Whereas the active one is more almost hit or miss. And I think the reason I say that is because you'd mentioned like actively changing is like saying, or an example of actively changing is like saying, I'm trying to find a place where I fit in. So you actively change to fit into that area, which that may be, it may fail because you actually realize that you don't fit into that area and you fit in somewhere else, which is fine, but it may or may not work. So actively, it's good to be open to active changes. But at the same time, I do think the passive changes may have more of an impact on your life.
I couldn't agree more. I mean,
okay,
what
good.
you just said is probably the topic for a social psychology, a sociology study.
So not accounting?
Yeah, it might be tough to fit that into accounting. I don't know how you do that, right? Because as we know, accounting is boring.
Amen.
Right?
Yeah, there you go.
So that being said, I have no idea, but I believe that 100%. You try new things. Some things take, some things don't. Some things are temporary. But the slow evolution that you undergo by virtue of all the experiences that you encounter, all the people that come into your life, the entirety of the context that you're in, right? Everything from job to environment to location, everything like that is going to mold who you are from the ground up. So it's going to be more fundamental change to who you are than saying, all right, now I'm going to dress all in black like Steve Jobs, or I'm going to wear T-shirts every day like Mark Zuckerberg, or I'm going to, that type of thing because you want to be like them, right? Type scenario. So,
well, should you go into college expecting to change?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I think you should. It's inevitable, right? No matter how hard you try not to change, exposure is going to cause you to change, even if you're not actively pursuing anything different. And I think this is what you see with a lot of students who don't they may go to a commuter school where they don't experience all of the extracurricular life that comes with going to college and leaving home for the first time as a traditional student does type scenario, or you're taking your classes online, so you don't get the camaraderie and you're not taking part in campus life, the co-curricular aspects of education there. So you're just learning things. But even just the learning things, the flat, raw exposure to information and scenarios and reasoning through it and things like that, there's no way. You're going to grow. You're going to expand. Okay? I mean, we come from singular points of view and we start to see more, and which means our singular point of view gets wider, right?
Yeah.
Type scenario. So with that being said, it's inevitable. As you go through life, you're going to grow. You're going to change somewhat unless you are very isolated and very averse to being around anyone different than you, right? Or absorbing information that is outside of your already established knowledge base. You're going to change. So I think you've got to go into college expecting it. It's going to happen whether you like it or not.
So let me ask the same question in a different way, because this is just kind of dawned on me that we're kind of looking at the change as dichotomous. You were here and then you change to this. What if you go into college on like a continuum of some kind of trait? I don't know what it is, but some trait that we're talking about that we look at and we say, okay, it's going to change. And what we've been saying is maybe it's going to change differently. So maybe the trait that we're looking at is actually kind of has a negative connotation, but not super negative. It's just a negative connotation. So on the continuum, it's really like on a scale of, it's on 0. And we keep saying that you're going to grow and you're going to change. And it kind of gives the perception of it's going to get into like, you're going to take the 0 and go to the positive side, which is away from what you normally are. Is it possible that the change occurs that deepens or further ingrains something? So instead of it being on a 0 level, you actually are further down on a negative level, if that makes any sense whatsoever?
Oh, yeah, without question. I mean, there's actually, I remember that, I forget the name of the movie. The actor Malik Williams, I believe it was, starred in it. Ice Cube,
I don't have a clue.
He starred in it as well. Anyway, I think I forget the actors in it. It was made a long time ago, but you had it was a scenario where a guy shows up to college, and he had some probably some racist outlooks or tendencies, but he got to college and he didn't fit in. And the one, that's how affinity groups trap you, right? They look for people who aren't necessarily accepted by society, and they draw you in, type scenario. And he became, a Nazi skinhead, right? Type scenario, and ultimately committed murder on campus and stuff like that. So the answer to it is obviously yes. I mean, people can go in and have some predispositions that are negative, right? Mm-hmm. That get reinforced because we have a tendency to want to be around people who understand us, okay? Because we communicate better with them, right? It's an evolutionary thing that we do. So we get into these team mentalities, right? That's why you can have 2 political parties. That's why, and you can be polar opposites on all these issues within the political party, not because you fully understand the issues, or that if you looked at these in the abstract and had no idea what your party wanted versus another one, that you would choose one or the other. It's a team-based mentality, right? Everything from, I like this, I like everybody who likes this sports team, to I like everybody who likes this political party, and then you just gravitate towards a collective point of view, right? So that being said, right, I mean, our tendency to gravitate towards people who are like us leads us down a road where we will pick aspects of our life, positive or negative, and try to reinforce them. Now, the college environment in itself seeks to go the opposite direction. It seeks to open your mind to thought, to break you away from ingrained thought. But I will say this, And I've seen this with students over the years, and I've seen it with friends, or colleagues or other students when I was a student going through and stuff. The more technical the program, the less oriented the program is towards thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
Understanding behind it, and more focused on training. This is how you do it. The less it was able to change a person's view or way of thinking, right? The less a person changed. They tend to ingrain further. They tend to do that confirmation bias thing, where they just look for information to ingrain their already existing beliefs. That's probably the biggest negative I see with non-traditional students. I love teaching non-traditional students. They are very attentive to the subject matter. They've seen some things, and so they're able, and particularly when I teach things like law and negotiations and stuff, it's things that they've seen or engaged in. So they tend to know more. They tend to have more opinions about it. They tend to that type of thing. But what I also see in them is they have these deeply ingrained beliefs that sometimes are on foundational ignorance, right? Lots of things like sexism or racism or, things like that, right? Things that we tend to see as negative. They tend to double down on that. They tend to do that confirmation bias thing where they look for every scenario in the world to reinforce what they already believe. And, that's why your news cycles are so dangerous towards people. They aren't there to inform. They're there to convince, because they're so politically motivated. And what you find is people who have any level of interest or belief, positive or negative, they see these outlets as reinforcing those. So they just go deeper and deeper and deeper, and it limits their ability to think beyond what they're exposed to. So the same thing happens in college, right? But it's built or structured not to do that. It's built or structured to make you think more deeply, right?
All right. Well, we go to college. We're expecting to change. You go off to college. You spend a semester or two in college. You start to change. You come back home, and your family and friends see this change. What can families and friends expect, or what can you expect from family and friends as they start to notice these changes? You start to change, whether they be active or passive.
See, this is actually the reason why I proposed this topic.
Okay.
Put it on the docket for us to talk about, just by virtue of, well, I'd say the answer to your question: what do we expect from friends and family when you go off to college? You're going to change. They're not.
They're not. Yeah, I was going to say they're not.
So here's the thing. You may change in furtherance of what they are hoping you acquire: more skills, more knowledge, more exposure to the world, more worldliness, that type of thing. And it may be in the direction that they're trying to promote with you. If you're kind of like me, where, your parents view college as just, okay, you got to do that so you can go get a better job, so you can make more money, so you don't have to struggle, right? The aspects of a different point of view, right? The aspects of appreciating different things, the expanding your mind and stuff, that is not something they account for. They don't know about it. They aren't ready for it type scenario. And they see you start to change as a person, and then they don't like you, or they're frustrated by it, right? They don't like who you're becoming because you're different than you were when you left. Right?
I was actually going to ask you, do you think it's different, the expectation or the way families react and friends react to you coming back from college and being changed? Does it depend on if your family and friends went to college too?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. Well, lower socioeconomic groups with lower levels of education, particularly, we know from research, particularly among white men, they resent education. Mm-hmm. They see it as trying to manipulate you or change you towards a liberal view or something like that, where, a liberal view, where on the negative oftentimes is associated with naivety, on the positive view is associated with mindfulness and open-mindedness and acceptance of others type scenario. So that being said, right, when you come from a singular background and something starts to reinforce beliefs that might be contrary to what, the beliefs of people you were around before, And college will do that. Not that it's any way attempting to change you. It's just the collective exposure leads you one way. Well, some people are reactive and say change is bad, right? Any change is bad because everything's perfect and it looks like everything that changes is always for the worst. Well, they only believe that because, we romanticize the past. We forget the bad and we only look for the good, right? Optimism turns to pessimism because, type scenario where on the other side where you see the world as being before you, it's a growth opportunity, it's blah, blah, blah. You go to college, you're trying to increase your knowledge base, you're trying to expand your experiences, things like that. All of a sudden you start to diverge from the people you're around. I'm not going to lie, it caused a lot of problems with me and my family, right? They, and still to this day, they don't accept me, and my way of thinking in many ways and areas, type scenarios. And I likewise have serious issues and reservations with theirs type scenario. My whole hometown, it's very difficult for me to relate to people there in any way, just by virtue of how much I've changed. So, my home doesn't feel like home the same way it did when I was growing up, it type scenario. So you can expect that. And I tell every year, I ask my students, my, upper level students, generally my, negotiations course or my professionalism course that I teach. I say, when you go back to your hometown, even if it's close by, where is it? If it's a long way away, it doesn't matter. When you go back and you talk to the people that you were around growing up, and they never left. They never exposed themselves to different parts of the world. They never went on to anything different. They're still in that same environment that they were in. The environment that you used to be in. Do you notice a change? And without fail, it's almost 100%. People throw their hands up and just want to tell their story. Mm-hmm. Oh, I go back and talk to my high school friends. We have nothing to talk about anymore. They still talk about the same things they talked about from high school. I start to talk about something and they look at me with a blank stare like, what are you even talking about? Type scenario. And these are things that are important to my life now, but they know nothing about them, type scenario. And the fact that I see that over and over, and I actually query my students on it every single year just to hear their account with, and it's the same thing over and over. There's nothing special that has tried to lead them down a path. It's just the exposure to a wide variety of people with diverse, differing points of view all in one place while you are soaking up so much knowledge, about as much as you can stand. You've never been more malleable. You've never been more open to influence. And that change that it evolves from that in many ways is going to cause a lot of problems in your existing life.
Yeah.
Now, I know that might have been different from you because you moved around some and you had a parent in higher education, right?
Yeah.
So someone who's already been exposed, a multicultural father who's already been exposed to a lot, right?
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that even there's I mean, obviously as we go through our careers, as we go through different things, I mean, like I said before, we all change in different areas of our life. And so, yeah, I mean, I didn't have that big of a difference when I got out of undergrad and when I got out of master's program. But there's been some other things that, have changed, and it does have an effect, but it's not necessarily a negative effect. And the reason I say it's not necessarily a negative effect is maybe it's just because I've accepted the fact that we're different on these areas, and I just don't bring it up. I just don't want to bring it up because I don't want to cause any issues to arise or anything like that. So, but I mean, even that they're few and far between. I didn't change on a ton of traits when I was coming out of college from when I went in. So there were some, like you said, the motivation side of it, which is not going to affect family and friends as much. And And so, yeah, I was slightly different. And I think, like you said, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that, I had a parent that went through college and went through lots of rounds of college to get their PhD and postdoctorate. But I also had my mom who finished high school. That was it. Mm-hmm. So I had a completely different dynamic than most because I had both sides of the coin. So yeah, it was an interesting way, and and I think I also think that there is a factor in there that we hadn't considered. We did the parents not having a college education versus parents that do have a college education. I think there is the factor of, did you go away from college or away to college, or did you stay at home? Because if you stay at home, that slow transition, they actually grow with you. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you come back after a year and you've changed, it hits them like a brick wall. And so I think that's something else that potentially could have a factor on how that's.
And you may be able to talk to this too. You went to college locally, right? So
yep.
You were in the same environment. I left a small cotton farming town,
mm-hmm.
right, to a very international city, small city, but a city nonetheless, with tons of foreign people. It's entertainment, food and beverage, mm-hmm. culture, tons of art, tons of cultural influence type scenario. So the environment I was in was just, everything felt like a new experience. I actually, that newness, that just wanting to look around and understand everything that was around me is what I think affected me more than anything. I've never felt more alive than when I first went there. And then again, when I got to study abroad for the first time and then the second time, everything is new, right? You're speaking a different language, so every word you hear is new. But you start to notice more about how people express themselves, about how people interact with each other, just how they organize their life, what the things that they value, like everything. You just stay so on edge all the time by the novelty of every situation, of every scenario. And it makes you grow. You have to grow with it. But it is the opposite of a comfort zone. You have no zone. You're trying to create a zone, right? But you don't come from a part from which something from which you are departing. You're wholly deposited into something new. And, that goes back to our episode of why, a study abroad in itself can be such a life-changing experience. Well, college, when you go away, when you live on campus and you, are enveloped into the environment, is obviously going to impact who you are more than if, it's a slower transition type thing. And then the influences around you are less extreme.
Yeah. Right? I kind of see, again, my mind goes back to some kind of illustration, because I see if all books were in picture books, I'd kill it. But to kind of illustrate that fact, like I kind of look at it, this is as a Venn diagram almost, where that because I stayed at home, my circles of where I came from and what I'm learning still overlap, because I still brought a little bit of what I grew up as into college because I'm still living at home. So my circles overlap, whereas your circles were completely apart because you left your town to a new experience. There was not much that kept you got that new kind of experience, and so you didn't daily see that thing that brought you back home.
Right.
So that's been I'm shocked because I was not expecting this topic to be this deep. I thought it was, we were going to be able to laugh and cut up, and we did at the beginning, but it got real deep, and that's really cool to be able to, because I think it's more impactful for us to share our sides of it too, and not just always joke around. Although I do like the joking around side too.
Yeah. Well, I think if we've made people aware of what they're going to see and what to expect and why, we've done our job.
Yeah.
Right?
And this is what I tell my students all the time. I'm not here to tell you what's good or bad. I'm just telling you. I'm here to tell you what the opportunities are for out there, so you can make the decision for your situation. So, well, that's awesome. Do you have any parting words before you head out?
Hit us up on the website. Just remind everybody, check out our stuff, send us messages, let us know what you want to hear about. That's how we're going to keep this thing going. So we hope to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, until next time, we hope to see you there. Goodbye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Reschool'd podcast. Be sure to head over to reschool'd.com for news and other information on things we're getting into.